You see, our boy here is a huge fan of Truck-kun, and someday wants to get isekai'd himself. But our boy here got no patience and just decided to yeet himself off the building. As our boy's body lies there lifelessly, our boy's ghost is now just standing there, literally with nothing to do next, because instead of getting isekai'd, our boy here just turned into a fucking literal ghost. So basically our boy is sitting there thinking about all his questionable life choices and the dumb stuff he's pulled, when suddenly his body just yeets itself up and groans in pain. He thinks he sprained his ankle or something, which leaves Ghost Park frozen solid in shock. And oh BW, this ghost I'm yapping about, that's our boy, the OG himself. Anyway, the dude currently driving his body claims it's time to start living life to the absolute fullest, and that leaves the ghost completely bewildered. Right at that moment, Park tries to let out a terrified scream as the sun starts dipping over the city. Panicking hard, the ghost screams at the intruder who jacked his body to wait up. He's basically begging the guy to chill for a sec, but the intruder just keeps walking, yapping to himself. Park asks if he's straight up deaf, but the intruder just makes thoughtful noises while adjusting his glasses. The ghost realizes the guy can hear him just fine, and yells in anger as the young man casually slides his glasses off. Park calls the intruder a body snatcher, and the guy just grabs the ghost by his hair, saying he's been extremely patient with him. The ghost is completely lost on how he can even get touched, while the guy warns him he tried to be nice about it, but honestly, it's just too much work. Then the intruder just straight up lands a Mike Tyson special right on our boy's face and tells him to watch his tone, making a terrified Park instantly apologize. The guy demands to know who gave him permission to end his own life, asking if he really wants to disappear for good, backing Park into a corner. Park apologizes for being disrespectful and asks who he even is and what his death has to do with his body getting possessed out of literally nowhere. The intruder starts smacking the ghost around and says it has everything to do with it, while Park cries out in pain, terrified he's about to turn into some kind of monster. The guy reveals he's actually the one keeping the kid from losing his sanity, and Park notices the agonizing pain has already vanished. The guy tells him to figure out why he's even able to hit a ghost in the first place, and Park guesses he's gotta be a shaman, which the intruder confirms. He then drops the bomb that he's actually Park's own ancestor, a guy who racked up so much good karma in his past life that he got promised a reincarnation within his own bloodline. Even so, our boy is still completely lost and asks what that's even supposed to mean. The ancestor loses his patience and gives him another Mike Tyson special to the face while re-yapping the whole bloodline reincarnation explanation all over again. He explains he was destined to be reborn as Park's own descendant and asks what's supposed to happen now that the sole heir went and ended his own life. Even though part of him just wants to keep beating the kid up, the man mentions he just sensed something incredibly bizarre going down nearby. He stresses that causality itself was supposed to guarantee the family line wouldn't end until he was born. That was literally the promised destiny. But then out of nowhere, the kid just decides to quit on life and wipe out the entire bloodline all by himself. He points out that this whole tragedy makes zero sense and straight up defies the laws of causality and fate. The ancestor demands a foolproof explanation, threatening to tear Park's soul apart right then and there if he can't justify himself. Our boy says there's a reason, but he starts shaking just thinking about it, and begs for a second to catch his breath and calm down. The ancestor notices the kid's being consumed by some deep-seated terror, and wonders what could possibly be scary enough to break causality itself. The man figures the only cure for fear is more fear, so he decides to keep roughing him up until he talks, sending the boy into a total panic. He mocks him, telling the kid to enjoy breathing while he still can, but suddenly clocks a glowing purple energy mark on his wrist. Seeing that mark light up, the ancestor lets out a heavy sigh as he finally connects the dots on what's really going on. The ancestor explains that Park is possessed, and by something incredibly foul at that. He wonders how such an ancient, deep-rooted grudge could possibly latch onto a kid this young. The man reflects that even back when he was alive, he rarely ran into a grudge carrying this much beef. Park mentions his dad was just a regular office worker, which strikes the ancestor as odd, prompting him to ask if the dad wasn't a shaman too. Our boy explains his dad was in fact a shaman, but only did it as a side hustle, since business was slow and he needed a real job to make ends meet. But the actual nightmare kicked off the day his dad went on a business trip, and just completely vanished off the face of the earth, basically went out to buy the milk in another universe. In the end, all Park was left with was his dad's belongings, including one incredibly dangerous jar that had been kept in the family for generations. Since his dad wasn't around to look after it anymore, the jar's protective talisman slowly started wearing down and falling apart. On a completely ordinary night while Park was just chilling, minding his business, he suddenly hears a strange noise coming from inside the house. It sounded like something shattering, so he opens his bedroom door, feeling seriously anxious. Looking down at the floor, our boy starts wondering what that could possibly be, and why it looks like that. He can't wrap his head around why the jar broke, even though he grew up knowing all about shaman stuff. He figures that while he'd probably freak out seeing an actual ghost, he was already kind of used to this kind of thing. Spirits and the paranormal weren't exactly foreign territory for him. Shrugging it off, he decides he'll just clean up the whole mess in the morning. But then he remembers he's gotta run to the convenience store to grab a few things he's out of, like tissues and lotion. While walking and mentally running through his shopping list, not a single worry in the world, Park comes face to face for the very first time with a giant bizarre hand. The ancestor asks if the boy's dad didn't have any friends, and Park, sounding offended, snaps back that he definitely did. He recalls his dad always telling him to look up his best friend, a powerful exorcist, if things ever got seriously dangerous. While the monster howls in pain, an absolutely jacked monk tells it to shut its mouth so it doesn't scare the animals. The monk says he understands the creature's resentment, but asks it to hang in there a little longer because it'll all be over soon. Suddenly the monk hears desperate screams calling out for him from right outside the temple gates. The man opens the gate, wondering who's knocking at this ungodly hour, and comes face to face with the terrified boy. Byung-chul recognizes the kid right away and asks if he needs more money, since he just sent his allowance not too long ago. Terrified, Park explains that something horrible broke out of the jar at his house and chased him down, but the monk cuts his yapping off. He claims he already knows exactly what's going on, leaving our boy completely puzzled. The monk says he doesn't need a single explanation. Right before an immense evil force slams into the area, staring down the enemy, the monk remarks he'd have honestly preferred it 1,000 times over, if the problem was just being short on cash. He warns the young man that he basically brought a literal monster along with him, leaving Park even more terrified by the sheer size of the thing. Without wasting a second, the monster lunges forward, hurling several of its hands straight at them. Byung-chul calls the demon impatient and starts swinging, counting every single hand that rushes toward them while dodging and counterattacking with insane agility, all the way up to number 6. Delivering brutal punches, the seasoned monk neutralizes the enemy's limbs one after another, making it all the way to a count of 9. But then the demon unleashes one more lightning-fast direct strike right at the exorcist. Byung-chul manages to catch the 10th arm, but he's caught off guard by the sheer strength and size behind that hit. The monk deduces that since it's rocking about 10 arms, this thing has got to be a highly dangerous 100-year-old demon, basically a once-in-a-lifetime sighting. He low-key regrets burning through his energy on the last demon, but he refuses to back down anyway. The monk confidently states that destiny always draws the strongest entities together, and challenges the 100-year-old demon to bring everything it's got. But right out of the dark shadows, hundreds of other terrifying hands manifest all around the monster. Seeing that absurd number of limbs reveal themselves, the monk's face says it all. Bro, they are cooked. Our boy literally thought they were winning, but the monk turned around dead serious and told the boy to actually listen to his instructions this time. The man said there was no other safe place left and ordered the boy to run without looking back, no matter what signal he gave. With zero time left for explanations, he warned that if the boy didn't make it home by sunrise, the worst would go down. The monk coldly told him to end his own life if he didn't survive, leaving the young man completely shaken. But the young man understood the stakes the second he remembered the 10-armed beast was basically an unkillable threat. The monk screamed at him to run immediately, while the monster kept advancing with hundreds of shadowy hands. The boy fled desperately, leaving the monk behind to fight solo against that entire horde of claws. While waiting it out, the young man got consumed by the terror of the end, by his father's resentment, and by his own guilt over the monk. He cried a ton, apologizing non-stop, until he finally realized the monk never made it back by morning. The young man admits he just couldn't handle the fear anymore. Then the ancestor drops the truth. That creature was never a 100-year demon to begin with. He insisted the monster with hundreds of hands was something infinitely more dangerous than the boy ever imagined. The ancestor explained that these kinds of beings are basically living calamities, sitting at the absolute top of all evil spirits. With a dead serious look, he revealed those monstrous creatures are called 1,000-year demons. The young man is straight up shocked to find out an entity of that power level was chasing his own body this whole time. Desperate, the ghost asks what they're supposed to do now, but the ancestor tells him to zip it so he can actually think. He figures either the demon lost their trail, or the monk Byung-chul somehow managed to beat it in battle. Suddenly the boy feels a crushing pressure slam into his chest and realizes a malicious presence is way too close for comfort. The young man screams in terror as the terrible living calamity emerges from the shadows right behind them, ready to backshot both of them. The ancestor realizes the monster was never going to let its prey escape once it caught that crushing aura. Our boy spirals into full panic mode as the creature stretches its bizarre arms out over them. The ancestor feels his spiritual power getting drained, but notices the creature's actually smart enough to yap. He tries to negotiate, claiming he's a powerful ancestor, and asks why an immortal would even want a weak body like this. The 1,000-year demon flashes a creepy smile and says thinking of this as a fight would honestly be funny. The monster states the power gap between them is absolute, and that the ancestor is nothing but the War 1 germ to him. Suddenly a brutal headache slams our boy. The creature warns that even the desire to talk to a demon like it is already a massive offense. It says that to even speak with it, he should have brought the greatest, oldest shaman kings in human history. The giant demon stares them down with glowing eyes, saying it would only bother speaking with legends of the past. Right as the creature preps to backshot them, the ancestor gets visibly annoyed and straight up slapped the fucking thing and asks who exactly it thinks it's talking to. The demon looks caught off guard, and the man irritably warns that the monster really should have just agreed to talk it out peacefully. He cracks his neck and says his reincarnation is already a mess, and that the creature just made a grave mistake. With his eyes lighting up, he finally reveals himself as Namhai Chachang, the legendary second king of Sila and the very first shaman ruler. And that's where the flashback kicks off. 2,000 years back in the Sila era, back when Namhai Chachang was still alive and roaming free. Back then, monsters and evil spirits wandered around freely, basically as common as wild animals. A masked man walks exhaustedly through the forest, stressed out after taking the wrong path at night. Suddenly he senses a strange presence right behind him and freezes up completely in fear. He comes face to face with a hideous, sharp-toothed creature that just appears right in front of him out of nowhere. The man collapses to the ground in despair once he realizes the terrifying creature is the dreaded Black Death demon. He wonders how a monster on that level ended up in some quiet village before noticing something off. To the masked man's shock, the terrifying creature was already dead, hanging limp from a tree branch. He's confused, trying to figure out who could have possibly been capable of taking down something that powerful. But soon he realizes this wasn't even the only terrible demon defeated in that deserted spot. The man is in total shock as he looks ahead and spots a gigantic pile of dead monsters. Among the bodies were legendary names like the Phantom Spirit King and the terrifying Execution Demon. All the strongest monsters of that entire era got wiped out together, and he can't stop wondering who could possibly hold that kind of power. Suddenly, a mysterious voice calls out from the top of the pile of bodies, asking who he is. The blue-haired boy sitting casually on top of the creatures tells the man to just approach, no hesitation needed. That was young Namhai, only 12 years old at the time, already threatening to cut the man down if he turned out to be a ghost. The man is stunned, thinking there's no way a kid who hasn't even hit adulthood could have pulled all this off. Namhai starts a countdown, ready to attack the man if he doesn't answer fast enough. Instead of responding with fear, the masked man just laughs and shouts that this is absolutely magnificent. He rushes forward, saying the youth has every bit of potential to surpass him in just 1 year flat. The man explains he only came here because he'd heard rumors about a seriously strong exorcist in the area. The boy tries to strike him with his blade, but the man blocks it easily and praises his insane talent. The man warns that the sword will never cut him and asks the boy to hear out his proper introduction. The mysterious being boasts that he's the immortal one, uncuttable by any weapon, revealing himself as the iron monster Bulgasal, more like Booger. While the boy just watches, Bulgasal flashes a sinister smile and pitches the young hunter a fun little bet. He adds that if the boy doesn't want in on the bet, they can just fight instead, no hard feelings. Namhai closes his eyes for a second, calmly sizing up the whole situation. The youth then puts his weapon away and decides to just ask what kind of bet the monster's actually offering. Bulgasal is impressed by the boy's self-control and lays out the rules. Dead simple. The bet is just this: land a single hit on the monster and win the whole challenge. If the boy wins, the monster promises to become his personal martial arts master. The young fucking prodigy looks confused, but the monster insists he genuinely likes the kid and that the two of them have a lot in common. He claims the boy's eyes belong to a lone predator who already knows the emptiness at the top, though he warns he's still immature and promises to make him #1 in the world if he wins the bet. Before the monster could even finish yapping his sentence, our boy lands a straight-up Mike Tyson special right to his face. With the monster now flat on the ground, our boy calmly asks if that makes him his disciple now, cool as ever. He lands another hard hit, and asks if hitting him again means he just got expelled from training instead. Our boy keeps hitting him, throwing out a sarcastic line about how easy it is to get kicked out by such a weak master. The monster gets irritated being compared to the ugly monster himself, apparently, and mocks the whole empty eyes nonsense he got fed earlier. Our boy decides he's turning him into his personal slave, and tries to remember the monster's weird original name, only to give up entirely. He just decides to name the monster Sunbok, unknowingly kicking off a tragic new life for the poor guy. Our boy orders Sunbok to shout the name of a special move while attacking a wild monster nearby, fully treating him like a pet on a leash. He threatens to zap him with a painful electric talisman if the monster ever refuses to obey his silly little orders. 3 years pass, and soon Sunbok appears huddled in a corner, trembling in fear the second he hears our boy calling out for him. Our boy finds him clutching a jar, and the monster tries to lie, insisting he was just sleeping in there. Totally normal behavior. Our boy smiles and says he brought a brand new perfect tool to help him sleep way better this time. He reveals the 1,000-year sealing jar, promising to trap the monster inside just to test it out real quick. Cutting back to the present, the hero Namhai realizes that old jar was the exact same one sitting in his own house this whole time. The furious monster re-emerges, seeking revenge against the bloodline of the hunter who sealed him away back then. Namhai tries to calm the monster down, insisting everything he did in the past had a good reason behind it. He states, half-joking, that everything he ever did was always for Sunbok's own good in the long run. But Sunbok doesn't want to hear any more yapping and unleashes a crushing attack, forcing both boys to dodge for their lives. Furious, Sunbok shouts that he already told the hunter to shut his mouth, right before continuing his violent assault without mercy. The attack grazes our boy, making it painfully clear the monster is straight up thirsty for blood here. Sunbok laughs loudly at the whole situation and mocks our boy's face, saying he looks pathetic now compared to before. The monster asks if he really thought he'd be dealing with the same weak Sunbok from 2,000 years ago. Big mistake. He says he kept training and getting way stronger the entire time the hunter was knocked out for millennia straight. Sunbok mocks him, saying the guy's now nothing but a weak microbe reincarnated into a fragile little body. The monster launches a crushing string of strikes and asks if he genuinely believed he could win this fight. But mid-assault, the monster suddenly feels something extremely weird happening to his attacks. Despite the obvious power gap, our boy just kept calmly asking for everyone to relax, completely unbothered. Sunbok is caught off guard realizing that not a single one of his powerful strikes has actually landed. Namhai complains that he tried to settle this with a conversation first, warning that the monster basically asked for this outcome himself. The monster locks his one giant eye onto him, dead serious now. Realizing not a single attack has touched our boy's tiny frame, the guy leaps into the air with insane agility and jokes that it's honestly his own fault for neglecting the monster's training. Sunbok is left totally baffled, unable to understand how our boy's this fast in such a weak-looking body of his. Our boy warns that since the monster clearly doesn't learn even from dying, he's gonna need a good beating first before anything else. He winds up a devastating punch, saying they'll talk properly once the monster regains his common sense again. The scene then cuts to a random kimbap restaurant, where Namhai explains that his soul is seriously unstable right now, no cap. Mid-bite, he complains his reincarnation was a total disaster since he had to use an incompatible power source. He says they need to help him rack up positive karma so he can reincarnate the proper way this time. Our boy explains he'll handle this the best way he knows how, by taking a good hard look at the state of this modern era. He reflects on how a society this full of lies and crime is basically a perfect breeding ground for evil spirits. Namhai points his spoon with a confident smirk, saying the answer to the whole problem is actually pretty simple, TBH. He states, dead serious, that the only real solution is to completely wipe out every spiritual threat out there. Our boy proudly names his big new mission, the total eradication of evil spirits from the world. Easy as that. He asks for their help, but Sunbok slams his hand on the table furiously, yelling that this is a massive joke. Sunbok complains that he cleaned up the guy's messes for 3 whole years before getting locked away for over 2,000 years straight because of him. The monster calls him shameless, but our boy cuts him off, asking why the jar broke out of nowhere in the first place. He explains the jar cracked because time was finally up, and that this now guarantees a special restoration blessing for him. Our boy reveals this blessing can return the monster to his old human body from way back when, good as new. He shows off the jar's seal and explains that sticking it to his forehead will get him his old body back soon enough. The other boy at the table, Kim, just watches quietly as Namhai puts the monster back under contract. He promises to help Kim deal with bullies in exchange for help channeling gods and spirits properly. Kim asks if he really wouldn't have turned into an evil spirit thanks to Namhai, who confirms it proudly, no hesitation. Kim goes quiet for a second, realizing he would have turned into exactly that if he weren't his own descendant. Kim remembers with real sadness the terrible pain and emptiness he felt when he almost became a monster himself back then. He mentions that most evil souls out there were really just lost people who never understood what was even happening to them at all. And he finishes by saying they need to bring salvation to those suffering souls instead of just wiping them out completely. Namhai watches the boy, genuinely impressed by his courage despite everything. Even with zero spiritual ability, he's shocked to notice Kim is on the verge of entering a state of spiritual immersion, a near-awakening state that even seasoned exorcists struggle hard to reach. Our boy laughs internally at the kid's naivety, but is happy to see he's got legit air potential in him. He jokes that the kid can yap about salvation once he's actually strong, then asks him to sign the agreement already. But Kim catches him off guard, demanding a literal job contract with all his rights fully guaranteed, no exceptions. Our boy is left totally stunned, jaw on the floor, not understanding what this modern kid is even yapping about half the time. Kim insists that since they're literally going to be using his body, they need a proper document with crystal clear terms written out. Not getting it at all. Our boy asks if those 4 insurance companies are basically like the legendary 4 heavenly kings or something like that. Kim tries yapping about the insurance details, but the monster snatches the talisman off the table in the blink of an eye and bolts. Both boys stand there in shock watching Sunbok flee at insane speed with the special paper in hand. Our boy complains, annoyed that the cheater just straight up dipped the second he got his old body back. He grumbles that the cowardly monster ran without looking back, but soon a mysterious hand grips firmly onto the doorframe. Kim tries to play it off, saying the monster's probably just shy about his new body, insisting he'll be back any minute now. A tall young man in a black suit strolls in, leaving Namhai shook by his sheer speed alone. Kim compliments the monster's new look. Turns out he was an extremely handsome guy in his original human form after all. But Namhai picks up on a strange aura in the air, and Kim calls out for the monster to hurry up and sign the contract already. They're both confused, noticing the man in the suit seems to be searching for something else entirely nearby. The white-haired man coldly snaps his fingers while holding a bright red Buddhist rosary in hand, his sharp yellow eyes locked and fully focused on something hidden inside there. The mysterious guy smirks and quietly whispers that he's finally found his target. Namhae tenses up, sensing the stranger's presence is way too threatening to ignore. Our boy yanks his descendant back, ordering him to stand up immediately, the second he clocks the danger nearby. Suddenly, the red rosary starts pouring out intense flames. As the man preps a devastating blow, he invokes the power of literal hellfire, launching a scalding, brutal attack straight at the boys. A massive cloud of smoke bursts out from the windows of the small, quiet kimbap restaurant on the street. The explosive attack tears through part of the scenery and wraps the whole place in a wall of burning flames. Namhae shouts furiously through the smoke, calling the attacker ignorant while shielding his descendant from harm. He demands to know what this guy thinks he's doing, while Kim realizes this definitely wasn't Sunbok at all. The man in the suit walks in calmly, praising our boy for already expecting he'd be able to block that attack. The enemy warns that thousand-year demons aren't exactly easy to take down, obviously. Our boy just mocks him, saying they're honestly kinda weak anyway. He challenges Gojo Satoru lookalike, saying he's about to get an even worse beating, then suddenly hesitates. Namhae notices his own hand shaking and remembers he's been overusing power in a completely untrained body. Exhausted, he decides to try talking it out, but Kim starts screaming and provoking the enemy without thinking about the consequences at all. Gojo finally introduces himself as Shinil and reveals he's here hunting the thousand-year demon that seriously hurt his master in the past. Shinil warns the demon's trail ends right here and swears revenge for Master Namhae, ignoring literally any excuse from the hero. He points at Kaijim, convinced the boy himself is the demon. While the protagonist groans at the tremendous mix-up, Shinil rushes in with absurd speed, forcing the hero to scramble and block the incoming blow. He tells Kim to duck while he blocks a powerful strike that sends bright sparks flying through the whole hall. The hero figures even exhausted, he can still handle a young shaman like this, until he's blindsided by a brand new technique. He watches in shock as the opponent conjures up an even more powerful destructive burst of fire against them. A gigantic pillar of flame swallows the entire space, threatening to burn everything in its path inside that restaurant. Namhae admits the rivals got real talent, but warns Kim he doesn't have enough energy left to block that attack. He complains, laughing bitterly at the bad luck of not even getting time to catch his breath before this fight kicked off. Shinil coldly says he's done talking, and preps to end the whole thing with one final blast of flame. The demon hunter tells them to rest in peace, as he delivers what's basically his coup de grace. But a mysterious masked figure suddenly blocks the flaming attack with a sword, saying he can't let that happen here. Both boys sigh in relief, seeing help arrive just in the nick of time. From behind the mask, the mysterious warrior flashes a confident smile while holding back the powerful attack with his blade. Shinil steps back and angrily demands to know who this new guy is, daring to interfere in his revenge hunt. The newcomer finds the question funny, and says it's honestly painful not being recognized after getting hunted this much already. He launches into his classic intro line, claiming he's the immortal one who can't be cut by any blade in this world. He finishes with a dramatic pause, sword still raised, leaving the whole room curious about what's coming next. The warrior shocks everyone by declaring himself the very first official apostle of the group's 4 insurance companies' plan. The big reveal, Sunbok is now the apostle of the national pension, rocking a genuinely goonable appearance. Meanwhile, over at the ancient Byomho temple, under a silent, gloomy sky, a monk shouts in desperation, begging someone to urgently bring 5 more packages of spiritual sealing talismans. Another young priestess from the temple rushes in panicking, calling for anyone with energy left to come help immediately. Inside the temple, the fight against the possessed captain is still absolute chaos, with monks begging for backup just to hold down his left arm. The warriors shout that there's literally no one left to send while the terrifying monster Namhae cracks the floor open in a fit of rage. They report that all available personnel have already been thrown into the fight while others tend to the wounded scattered around the site. A young red-haired priestess sobs from exhaustion, saying she's hit her absolute limit and can't hold on much longer. Her energy is draining fast, but another ally shouts at her to pull it together so she doesn't die right there. The new captain laughed loudly, mocking his boyfriend's situation, groaning that of course the worst possible person had to show up here. The dangerous newcomer said this basically ruined the captain's reputation, licking his fingers with a sadistic grin plastered on his face. That was Ryan, the unhinged leader of the Serpent Gate, cheerfully asking if it was a problem if he just killed the captain right there. Ryan looked up at the night sky, smirking with mockery, and warned that as the acting leader here, he was about to give his very first official order. He directly ordered everyone to get the fuck out immediately, leaving the rest of the exorcists shook by the sudden command. Suhu tried to introduce himself, but got clipped by a lightning-fast hit from Ryan that scared him half to death and sliced his cheek in an instant. He froze up in terror, catching the sheer speed and absurd murderous intent radiating off that unhinged captain. Ryan laughed with total disdain at the director now sprawled on the ground, saying he'd only ever answered to one real boss in his entire life. He flashed a terrifying grin and asked, tone dripping with threat, if there was anyone else superior to him hanging around this temple right now. The others watched in panic, trembling as they responded that there was no one else, while Byomchael kept barking in the background. The possessed captain let out another deafening roar, red eyes flaring, and charged straight at him with pure fury. Byomchael slammed a violent punch into the floor, cracking open a huge crater and kicking up dust across the whole temple grounds. Ryong dodged with total ease and mockingly asked why his old friend was in such a deplorable, pathetic state. He questioned whether all that humiliation was really the reward for the justice his friend used to defend so proudly back in the day. He rested a hand on his forehead with an evil little smile and warned that he was about to give him a serious, practical combat lesson. He summoned his shadowy claws, known as the serpent's fangs, warning that things too rigid tended to snap easily under pressure. In the blink of an eye, the shadowy claws tore straight through the possessed captain's shoulder, sending blood splashing through the temple air. Beyond even that, he coughed up a huge mouthful of blood on top of it. Feeling the terrible pain of that brutal and precise blow from his opponent, Ryong smirked upon seeing his colleague on the ground and decided it was finally time to end that little joke once and for all. He declared that since the man was possessed, his so-called friend now counted as an evil spirit, and that for this he was stripped of every title he held. The villain raised 2 fingers, ready to do something with his own boyfriend under the pretext of an exorcism, leaving everyone present absolutely shook. The young director Sehu screamed in complete despair upon noticing that his dear captain was about to be murdered right in front of him. Suddenly a mysterious voice called out to Ryong, calling him a little snake. A single drop of water fell, and from it, a great dark wave surged. Ryong felt an absurdly powerful presence closing in from behind him, and his sarcastic smile dropped instantly. A young, imposing female figure gripped Ryong's arm, ordering him to chill out against the already defeated captain. The other exorcists exchanged surprised looks, thinking she was just a kid. But Director Sihu warned them, panicked, explaining to his terrified colleague that this person was in fact the supreme leader of their entire corporation, the one closest to being a literal god. She reigned at the very top of the 12 branches, commanding all 12 spiritual divisions represented by the legendary animals under the organization's protection. This was Cheonyang, supreme leader of the Dragon Gate, and she demanded sharply why he dared try to hurt the tiger. Yong went right back to smiling, mocking her, saying he never imagined the elder leader herself would show up to handle this. He admitted that he'd attacked knowing full well how much she cared for Byomchul, just to catch that look of despair on her face as she watched him die. Cheonyang called him Little Snake again, and this time her tone alone froze everyone's spine in the room. She opened her terrifying glowing blue eyes and coldly warned him that this was already the second time she'd had to call him out. Yong flashed a sarcastic grin and said he'd basically died twice in that one instant. He raised his hands mockingly, saying that ending his life would honestly be nothing for someone as strong as her. The villain leaned in close and whispered that she'd only caught him off guard that one time, and it wouldn't happen again. He flashed an evil smile and dared the supreme leader to try attacking him one more time. Yong's murderous aura got so overwhelming that the young exorcist nearby started choking on pure terror. Young director Sehu could barely breathe. Cheonyang placed her hand on his shoulder and calmly asked if he'd ever even had his guard up to begin with. She let a terrifying pressure loose and called him Little Snake once more, leaving the villain completely paralyzed. The leader warned that she knew he didn't actually want to hurt the tiger and ordered him to cut it out and just help already. She also told him to stop tormenting the younger ones, and Ryong just let out a defeated sigh. The villain switched his whole attitude instantly, joking that she always somehow knew exactly what he was thinking. Meanwhile, the 2 exorcists were still trying to catch their breath after nearly choking to death. Ryong said not to worry about Byomchael, because his research division would patch him right up. He then ordered every other exorcist to clear out, by direct order of the Supreme Commander. Desperate, Skiho dropped to his knees before Cheonyang and begged her to hear his appeal. The young director said he knew her word was absolute, but he still needed to risk his own life there. He explained that leaving the 2 captains alone was way too dangerous, since the 2 of them never got along in the first place. Cheonyang touched his face gently and remarked that the tiger had great loyal companions standing by his side. She used her power to instantly heal his bruised eye, telling him he had nothing to worry about, cured, and understanding absolutely nothing about what just happened. The kid then heard the leader ask Ryong if that wasn't true. The villain just smiled and said he still very much wanted to see her serene face twist in pain someday. Cheonyang stared at him with a strange, unreadable look, her eyes flashing an intense blue. And just like that, under the moonlight, the terrible tense standoff at the temple finally came to a close. Later, Sihu watched Byomchul, chained up, and asked if he was satisfied with how things turned out. He promised he wouldn't hurt him, per their agreement, and guaranteed he'd bring him back to normal. But right after, the villain confessed he genuinely gets pleasure out of watching the people he cares about suffer. Chom revealed mockingly that he'd already set up a little surprise before he even made that promise. He told him, laughing, that he'd sent his own disciple straight to a 1,000-year-old demon. After lying about his own strength, he savored the thought of watching his friend's reaction once he found out his disciple had died, but he got interrupted. The villain froze in shock, spinning around at the sound of a voice belonging to someone who was supposed to be dead. Shinil showed up alive and well at the door, his girlfriend Sunbuck right beside him, calling out for Captain Ryong. The kid greeted the captain respectfully, while the villain tried to hide how genuinely stunned he was. Shinil asked, faking a smile, if he'd managed to avenge his master by taking down the demon. Shinil said things got a little complicated, and his girlfriend complained they were in a hurry. The kid apologized, saying he'd report back later, leaving the captain completely speechless. Ryong got extremely irritated, realizing an unexpected variable had just crashed his whole evil plan. He wondered if he should just break his promise right there and wipe them all out. The villain locked his murderous gaze on Shinil as his shadow twisted into the shape of a giant serpent. He coldly sized each of them up, seriously considering ending every single life inside that room. But then our boy came running in, out of nowhere, shouting for everyone to wait up. He complained, panting about how weak Kim's body was and how zero physical stamina it had. Ryong watched the whole scene with pure disdain while our boy kept grumbling about being exhausted. The blue-haired kid finally stopped and realized the villain was staring him down hard. Ryong asked arrogantly what exactly he was looking at with that serious face. The villain stepped in closer and questioned whether he wasn't going to bow his head in his presence. 2 hours ago, an elderly woman named Park Soon-mi, owner of a local snack shop, was working at her store like any other day. Suddenly, an intense battle full of destructive flames broke out right in front of her. The old lady watched all that chaos unfold and honestly just thought to herself that she'd lived a long enough life already. In the middle of the fire, Shinil was shook to see an opponent operating on that level of power. Shinil noticed in shock that she dodged his strongest hit so easily, it was basically invisible to human eyes. Kim asked if she was even human, and our boy praised Sunbuck, saying the sync with her original body was flawless. He reflected that even though the human body was weaker, the white-haired opponent was still ridiculously skilled. Soon Sunbuck unleashed an intense evil energy and asked, mockingly, if he was already done with his weak little attacks. Shinil got furious and called her a filthy rat, demanding to know how long she planned to keep dodging his hits. She grabbed his arm without even trying and warned him to watch his mouth if he wanted to save his master. Sunbuck revealed that she'd kept his master's body for herself, but now she'd finally gotten her real form back. She said if he asked nicely with some respect she might show mercy, which only made him angrier. Shinil shot back, saying he'd much rather just beat her down and drag her there instead of trusting a demon. He threatened to rip her arms off, but Sunbuck just mocked him, saying she had over 200 arms to spare. Sunbuck said she liked playing with words, and decided he'd rip her mouth off first before the arm. The girl just smirked and doubted that his fragile rosary could do anything to her at all. The guy said she was underestimating his power, but she pointed at his neck, warning him that his weakness wasn't in the rosary at all. Shinil's eyes suddenly went wide as he felt danger, realizing he was completely at her mercy. Desperate, he shouted that he was the one who cast the curse in the first place, and she should be on her knees begging him. Sunbuck made a funny face and asked if he wanted his arm ripped off first or his mouth. She explained, calmly, that his master was weak, and pretty much any bad spirit could possess his body with zero effort. With no way out, the guy begged her to help immediately, but Sunbuck demanded he call her Big Sis first. First though, he warned her there was an extremely dangerous entity occupying his master's body, though she doubted it could be worse than her. Shinil revealed that his master had been trying to seal away a Jukuni, and the group froze in shock. Kim asked if the monster was strong, and she confirmed it was one of the 5 elements, and stronger than she was, one of the 5 worst entities of the Sila period, the kind that once needed entire armies just to contain. The kid worried about what would happen to the monk, but our boy just smiled, saying everything would be fine. He revealed, laughing, that he was actually the one who created the 5 Elements group way back, after beating all those monsters into shape himself. The group decided to head out and save the monk, since he ended up like that, trying to help their hunt. Kim asked if the Dioxini monster would even remember him after all this time sealed away. Our boy admitted it might have forgotten, but said if things got rough, they still had Sunbuck close by. He took control of Kim's hand and stated, confidently, that it didn't really matter whether the monster's mind remembered or not. Our boy said even if its mind forgot, its body would definitely still remember the beating. Shinil worried about the restaurant getting wrecked, and about the old lady, but our boy said it would all get fixed. The hunter explained every memory and trace would be fully restored, leaving the guy shook at that kind of power. Our boy stared out at the horizon, dead serious, saying the spiritual plane was fully capable of pulling that off. 2 hours later, back at the temple, a deafening roar tore through the silence of the night under the full moon. The possessed monk, once Biom Kyeol, screamed in pain and fury as the dark power completely consumed his body. He was trapped behind heavy chains while Shinil came running in, desperate to save him. The guy ordered Sunbuck to undo the curse immediately, but she complained that being rushed just killed all her motivation. She suddenly stopped, hearing someone approach, telling them to hold off for a second before acting. Our boy appeared beside the captain, who warned that they couldn't just break the seal carelessly. Kim's floating soul watched Ryong with total curiosity, trying to figure out who this guy even was. The kid felt that this long-haired man with the cynical smile was giving off an extremely dangerous aura. Shinil dismissed the idea, saying that curse was way too high level, and doubted some high schooler could handle it. Sunbuk got irritated at being called a high schooler, silently thinking to herself that she was literally the one who created that curse. She remembered 2 hours earlier, when Shinil had explained the whole balance their corporation was responsible for keeping. He'd warned her that their presence was seen as a serious, dangerous anomaly by the organization. Because of that, he'd asked them not to reveal their real identities, to avoid stirring up new conflict. To cover herself, Sunbuk made up a story about just spying on her boyfriend, leaving Shinil completely floored. The guy complained about how dumb that lie was, but she whispered back that she panicked and just said the first thing that came to mind. Our boy cut into their silly little back and forth, saying they needed to undo the seal and the curse at the exact same time. He warned that breaking the seal alone would send the possessed monster after them full force, wrecking the whole sacred temple in the process. The hunter said he originally planned to just wait the monster out until it got tired, but noted that wouldn't really be necessary anymore. Sunbuk quickly switched her expression, pretending she'd totally understood the hero's plan the whole time. Shinil asked if he should undo the spell from the very start, but she warned it honestly depended on his skill level. She said she could handle her part, and the villain invited her to join his division, but Sunbuk immediately changed the subject. The possessed captain started to grow, and Shinil bragged, saying he was about to show her something incredible. He kept insisting she join his team, but Sunbuk cracked a joke, saying she'd need to ask her parents for permission first. The villain got thrown off by that mocking answer, but before he could respond, she moved at insane speed. Suddenly the possessed captain broke free of his chains and landed a devastating punch right into Shinil's face. The brutal hit unleashed a massive burst of destructive energy that threw the captain backward and scared everyone else in the room. The impact cracked the stone floor and tore apart part of the temple's structure with sheer overwhelming force. Kim's soul screamed, desperate, saying he'd failed, but our boy stayed completely calm. Watching the scene closely, our boy noticed the enemy had really just gone way overboard attacking his rival. The Diokasini monster bragged about landing that hit and started counting off the rest of the opponents on the spot. He snapped his chains like nothing and asked arrogantly how mere humans dared to challenge him. The monster stomped hard on the ground and shouted, irritated, that he wouldn't forgive anyone who tried to deceive him. But then his tone shifted, and he remarked loudly that this physical body he was in was surprisingly strong. Riding that wonderful rush of power, the demon said he was feeling just a little more merciful now. Goblin King Dioxini asked, threateningly, which one of them was responsible for breaking his seal. Sunbuk raised her hand casually, claiming full credit for breaking his curse herself. The monster let out a loud laugh, finding it hilarious that some random girl was the one who freed him. He proposed that if she agreed to become his bride, he'd spare her life, leaving the girl utterly confused. Sunbuk realized he genuinely didn't recognize her at all, and wondered if that was because she'd gotten hotter and more crackable. Our boy stared at the girl in total silence, and Kim's soul asked what exactly he was staring at so hard. The story rewinds again, 3 hours before that, when Shinil was completely drained, with no power left to block her attack. At that moment, the girl had been coldly calculating her options to make the most of that messy situation. Back in the present, Sunbuk pointed at the monster and lied, claiming he was her dear husband. Our boy congratulated her on the marriage, with sarcasm, while Kim shouted, desperate, that it wasn't like that at all. Our boy warned her that if she'd picked the wrong side, she'd be breaking their organization's rules. Dioxini hugged the girl and told her not to worry, since he'd protect her from that boy's threats. The monster felt the hero's spiritual energy, but noticed it was weak and flickering, like a candle in the wind. Our boy called him a goblin, and questioned how he still didn't recognize him. Even while sensing his spiritual power directly, he started yapping about the monster's forgetfulness, but stopped cold, catching on to something painfully obvious. Our boy remembered that his current power was sitting at rock bottom, which meant the monster had zero chance of recognizing him. Our boy flashed a smile, honestly finding the whole confusing mess kind of fun and interesting. He said he now understood Sunbuk's confidence, but warned her that this time she'd made a genuinely massive mistake. Our boy stepped closer to the monster and stated that in the world of goblins, loyalty mattered way more than life itself. Sunbuk started sweating cold, nerves kicking in as she realized our boy was about to pull some kind of tactic to win the goblin over. She tried to jog his memory about something, but the monster got irritated, asking what kind of nonsense she was even yapping about. Our boy recalled, nostalgic, the blows they'd traded under the jujube tree on some autumn night way back when. He wrapped the monster in a friendly hug and stated, smiling, that he was in truth his older brother. Our boy introduced himself as Namhai, the supreme master who'd beaten the goblin for the very first time, way back. He repeated the hug, saying once a brother, always a brother, while the monster just stared at him, stunned. Sunbuk was floored by the revelation while the possessed monster kept repeating Namhai's name, unsure. The girl started trembling in terror, realizing she might have just violated a major law of their lineage. She burst into tears out of despair and regret, dreading the fallout from her own dumb betrayal. Sunbuck snapped and shouted, inconsolable, demanding to know why our boy was suddenly claiming to be her goblin's brother. Suddenly the monster grabbed our boy by the collar and asked, irritated, who Namhai even was to call himself his brother. Our boy got confused and asked if he wasn't Goblin King Changbi, but the monster didn't recognize that name at all. He laughed loudly and explained that Changbi was the first-generation leader, while he himself was Jolbi, the third-generation leader. The new leader warned he was about to kill every last one of them right there, while Shin-il readied his desperate combat flames. Realizing the monster genuinely had no idea who our boy was, Sunbuck flashed an evil grin and started plotting her revenge. Sunbuck let out a relieved sigh and wiped away a totally fake tear, thrilled that her little lie had actually worked. In that world there existed monsters known as Dioxini, built with physical stats way beyond anything human. These creatures ran on hormones and dopamine, and their biggest thrill in life was never booze or pleasure such as snoo-snoo, but for them it's bloody combat, purely to test their own strength was the noblest, most sacred ritual there was. But once the hierarchy locked into place and stuck around forever, actual fights between them slowly started disappearing. So their very first king set up a bloody tournament, held every 100 years, called the Dioxini War, a ritual meant to crown their next supreme leader under the powerful title of Dioxini. While the elder was explaining that the final round was about to wrap up, young Jolbi cut him off, demanding to know who the king even was. The kid grabbed the elder's beard with total disdain, demanding to know immediately who the strongest warrior there really was. Learning the guy was only 902 years old, the elder remarked he was basically still a baby. The elder revealed the strongest was the second Dioxini, who'd already ruled absolutely for over 1,000 years, because while their average lifespan ran shorter, that particular ruler blew every expectation of age out of the water. Back then the mighty King Nokwangbi crushed every single challenger who dared step up in the tournament, always praising his fallen opponents on the ground after proving his dominance fair and square. Then, out of nowhere, young Jolbi stepped up before the king and challenged him to a direct fight for the supreme throne. He congratulated the king on his long reign, but made it crystal clear he was only there for one thing. The kid asked, point blank, if he was the king, and got into position without a shred of fear. He introduced himself as Jolbi, saying the elder had told him that beating the king would make him the new strongest warrior around. The kid asked if there'd be any issue with him taking his spot, and the king just smiled, finding the sheer nerve kind of funny. The ruler warned that titles like his were reserved strictly for the strong, but the kid guaranteed he was more than strong enough. The king got irritated at his arrogance for straight up ignoring the tournament's rules, but the kid just kept pushing for the fight anyway. Others tried to step in, saying the king was already exhausted, but he guaranteed he'd never back down from a challenge. Nokwangbi smiled in a way that was straight up intimidating, and warned the young intruder he was only just getting warmed up. He promised to teach the kid a brutal lesson for breaking tradition, and asked if he was ready. Jolbi flashed a confident grin, baring sharp teeth, saying he didn't even need to ask. The kid leapt into the air toward his opponent, kicking off the fight under a full moon lighting up the night sky. The two collided at insane speed, sending violent shockwaves ripping through the whole tournament arena as the king braced for the fight. Realizing this kid wasn't your average opponent, Jolbi told the old man to brace himself, while he unloaded fast attacks that genuinely caught the seasoned ruler off guard. The crowd joked that literally everyone there had gotten scolded by the king back when they were young and green, figuring a loss would do the kid some good, but the elder suddenly broke into a cold sweat. And honestly, the elder had good reason to panic, because what should have been a quick fight turned into a brutal, drawn-out war of attrition. The two kept trading violent blows non-stop, both showing off an absolutely absurd amount of physical endurance. The fierce dead-even battle dragged on way longer than anyone expected, leaving every spectator speechless. The other monsters watched, stunned, unable to wrap their heads around how some kid was fighting the king on completely equal footing. The elder explained that while the kid clearly had talent, the king still held the edge thanks to nearly 1,000 years of lived experience. His experience was simply superior, full stop. As the king landed a crushing blow on Jolbi, the elder predicted that talented kid would absolutely be the next Dioxini, and that prediction wasn't wrong. Still, the old demon completely missed one crucial detail about just how stubborn that kid actually was. The fight that should have ended in minutes dragged on for hundreds of exchanged backshots, stretching into an entire day. 2 days passed, and both relentless warriors kept swinging without a single sign of slowing down. 3 days of non-stop combat came and went, both monsters still trading destructive hits. The absolutely unhinged fight kept going until it hit the unbelievable mark of 4 straight days of pure violence. Finally, after 4 days and change of non-stop confrontation, the fight finally came to an end. The loser of that legendary battle was decided the moment one of them collapsed, wrecked and seriously wounded. On the ground, the mighty King Nokwangbi stared up at the sky in silence, accepting his defeat after such an insane fight. The one detail the elder had missed, the king's title would officially transfer in just 4 days flat. Jolbi admitted he'd taken the throne while ignoring the rulebook, but breathed a sigh of relief now that the fight was finally over. He turned to face the crowd and asked if anyone had a problem with some kid taking over the throne. Witnessing his ridiculous strength firsthand, every monster there bowed in respect, officially accepting the new Debiokshini of that generation. Back to the present, Jolbai slipped into an evil expression, saying he was about to inherit both the throne and the ambition of the ruler before him. He celebrated, saying he'd reign for a long, long time, but then Ryong appeared right behind him to ruin the day, and warned that his reign ended today. The new Goblin King got startled and scared, realizing he hadn't even sensed him closing in. Ryong asked why they even bothered holding secret tournaments like this, and remarked on how long they'd spent tracking them down. The elder goblin got furious, shouting, demanding to know how some mere human dared to interrupt their sacred tournament. Ryong smiled mockingly, and warned the elder to shut it if he didn't want to face the consequences. In that exact moment, a full team of exorcists from the organization showed up, and surrounded the entire tournament site. The villain warned it'd be tragic if they hurt themselves, while the monsters reeled from the surprise ambush. Jolbai, salty about getting played, realized these cowardly humans had waited until they were all exhausted to strike. Furious over the betrayal, the monster charged Ryong with everything he had, unloading a violent, destructive attack. Ryong dodged it easily, remarking surprised that the guy still had a good amount of strength left even after days of fighting. The villain closed his eyes with a cynical smile, prepping for a fast counterattack, then landed a brutal kick straight into the monster's open wound, exploiting his physical weakness completely. Jolbai screamed in pain as he got thrown clear across the arena, and Ryong mocked that the hit must have really hurt. Fallen, drained of strength, the monster cursed the exorcists out, calling them all cowards with zero honor. Ryong just smiled and shot back, jokingly that yeah, they really were just a bunch of cowardly humans. The villain openly bragged about having no honor whatsoever, only making the new Goblin King even angrier. JLB accepted the challenge, laughing at the sheer nerve, and decided he'd go ahead and land the very first blow. Without hesitating, the monster threw an overwhelming punch that slammed into our boy's face with brutal, destructive force. The Goblin King praised the kid's courage, claiming he'd actually held back so as not to kill him on the first hit. Our boy got thrown back, spitting blood, while the monster remarked he had to be a genuinely strong guy. JLB warned arrogantly that he was the strongest king in history, and that there were limits humans simply didn't get to cross. The monster hoped the beating taught a good lesson, while Shinil ran over, panicked to help his friend. But to everyone's shock, our boy stayed fully conscious and calmly warned that it was now his turn to hit back. He got up, wiping blood from his mouth, repeating that it was his turn, leaving both the monster and the hunter stunned at the sight. Our boy complained, irritated, at Kim's soul for never properly training his own body back in the day. Even now exhausted, he noticed that this human body's resistance and durability were absurdly abnormal. The hunter remembered the kid had already survived a fall from a building without so much as a scratch. He examined his own hand and concluded this wasn't some ordinary body, it was the physical body of a legitimate successor. Our boy flashed a cryptic smile, realizing that this huge revelation completely changed the direction of the fight. He warned the Goblin King he'd originally planned to go easy so as not to damage the monk's body, but now he was going all in. Our boy said he'd changed his mind about just showing off dominance, and the monster asked, irritated if he'd lost his mind. The hunter walked forward, all presence and menace, replying that the one who'd lost his mind was the monster, for daring to mess with him in the first place. Sunbuck smirked at the corner of her mouth watching the scene, mocking that the goblin was about to learn his lesson the hard way. Our boy wiped away blood and warned the monster that no matter how tall a mountain stood, it was still just a mountain. He clenched his fists and told the Goblin King to brace for a real lesson, starting right now. Our boy threw a devastating full-force punch, promising to show him the true vastness of the sky. Jolby was completely floored by the speed and sheer power behind that unavoidable hit. A massive explosion of spiritual energy erupted on the spot, leveling everything around it with the force of the punch. A baddie with pink hair showed up near the temple's ruins, watching the immense destruction with genuine admiration, remarking, quietly, that what she was seeing was straight-up unbelievable. The girl wandered through the wreckage and stumbled onto a torn-up body that looked a whole lot like Ryong's corpse. She stared down at the bloodied body, serious and worried, whispering the captain's name into the ruins. But then, suddenly, the girl started jumping for joy, celebrating that she'd basically hit the jackpot with her rival dead. She mocked, saying he always talked down field work, and ended up dying doing it anyway, right before she heard a voice behind her. Ryong popped up completely naked, remarking that he'd shown up pretty late, revealing he'd had to pull off a risky skin-changing technique to survive. The girl told him to shut his mouth, asking, irritated, if he'd done anything stupid to the possessed monk Biome Chael. Ryong dodged the question, saying he'd also taken a nasty hit, and she mocked that he really lived up to the whole little snake thing. The captain smirked and remarked that despite everything, there was one thing he was absolutely certain about. He pointed toward the horizon, where a massive column of spiritual energy was blazing bright against the sky. The force of our boy's punch had thrown up a whirlwind of smoke and dust visible from miles away. Back at the earlier battle site, the corporation's exorcists were racing against the clock to restore the wrecked restaurant. The group's leader ordered them to wipe the memories of all 14 witnesses before the damage drew any more attention. He pointed at the elderly shop owner, warning she was the last witness left who still needed her mind erased. The old lady cried, asking if she really had to forget, saying that at her age, every single memory was precious. She told him sadly that her late husband had just shown up in her dream, but the exorcist didn't hesitate for a second. The man said there were no exceptions, and touched her forehead to erase her memories, even against her will. The exorcist reflected that memory wiping was actually a complex process, one that meant altering emotions and details down at the cellular level. He lit a cigarette, thinking she really shouldn't be sad about losing that one night's memories, revealing to himself that consuming other people's memories basically felt like living an eternal high, every single day of his life. At the temple, Shinil watched everything in silence as the dust from the massive fight finally started to settle. Sunbuk and Kim Sol watched the scene, completely floored and speechless at how the duel had ended. The defeated Goblin King Jailby lay on the ground, asking, frustrated, why our boy had missed the punch on purpose, demanding to know the reason behind it. Instead of finishing him off for good, our boy explained that hitting him at full force would have completely destroyed Monk Byomshiel's body in the process. He flashed a confident smile and mocked, asking whether the monster even could have survived the hit if he'd actually connected. Stunned by both his wisdom and his strength, the once proud Goblin King dropped to his knees, respectfully bowing to his new older brother. Our boy smiled at his loyalty, and said he only had two simple conditions for full forgiveness. First, free Monk Byomshiel's body, and second, capture the traitor Sunbuk. Sunbuk spiraled into total panic, watching our boy point straight at her, and order her beat down. Then, suddenly our boy ran completely out of strength, and Kim woke back up in his own body. Understanding absolutely nothing, the glasses-wearing kid stared down at his own hands, confused while Sunbuk noticed the hero's soul had finally gone quiet. She celebrated, saying the danger had passed for now, and got ready to get even with the now defenseless kid. But before she could do a thing, Goblin King Jolby attacked her by surprise, pinning her down firmly. Sunbuk screamed in pain, furious over the sudden attack from the guy she'd figured was on her side. She shouted, calling the goblin a lunatic, reminding him she was his senior disciple and deserved more respect. The monster ignored her complaints entirely, and warned her he was simply carrying out the second task his older brother had left him. Sunbuk tried to talk her way out of it, twisting our boy's actual order, inventing on the spot that he'd only meant for the goblin to take good care of her, claiming the order was really about footbaths and good meals, leaving the Goblin King confused and thinking it over. The monster questioned whether his brother would really say something like that, but quickly decided she'd known his methods for 1,000 years, so sure, why not? The girl pointed a finger and questioned why the younger goblin kept interpreting his brother's orders. However he felt like, the monster fell right into her trap, agreeing her red made total sense, and Sunbuk milked his gullibility for all it was worth, ordering him to kneel. Meanwhile, Shinil ran over to Kim, asking if the kid was okay. The kid asked why he hadn't gotten hurt by the goblin's punch, and Shinil revealed the resistance came from his own body. Shinil studied Kim closely, and realized his old hunch about the kid had been right all along. The kid was in fact the legitimate successor of a major spiritual lineage, and he was completely floored to hear it. Shinil started explaining that first, he needed to understand the concept of ancestral divinity governing the clan, how legendary ancestors with special powers were the true source of all the spiritual DNA passed down through the generations, building up until someone born with the ancestor's power finally showed up in the bloodline. Those rare gifted individuals were called successors, and the current one was young Kim himself. The glasses kid got seriously overwhelmed by the reveal, and asked for a second to process that insane information. Kim asked if his missing dad had also been a successor, but Shinil said nope, he'd just been an ordinary shaman. The successor gene skips generations apparently, and the kid only got more worried about his dad's disappearance. Kim begged for help finding his father, but the hunter warned doing that outside the organization would be seriously tough. Shinil pushed for the kid to join their group, promising full protection and support in the search, but the kid shouted no immediately, refusing outright, not trusting how a company like that would treat him. Shinil tried to calm him down, explaining that as a successor, the treatment he'd get would be completely different from the norm. Sunbuk cut into the conversation with total disdain, and the goblin complained about humans always going after their kind. Then suddenly, a girl with pink hair appeared, hugging Sunbuk, saying the organization honestly wasn't that bad. The newcomer said she'd shown up late because she'd been off fighting Ryong, and Sunbuk jumped, startled that she hadn't even noticed her arrive. The girl in the cap turned to the group and said, calmly, that they needed to sort out this whole mess first, and even the powerful Goblin King broke a cold sweat, realizing he hadn't sensed this human's presence either. The girl waved cheerfully at Shinil, catching both the hunter and our boy off guard with her sudden entrance. Shinil greeted her as Captain Myoyun, revealing she led the organization's important rabbit division. Myoyun said she was pretty close with his master and asked, smiling for him to fill her in on everything. Then her expression turned dark, and she asked coldly if she needed to eliminate the goblin monster right then and there. But the Goblin King said seriously, that wouldn't be necessary. He'd already made a promise to our boy. The monster explained his older brother had ordered him to return the monk's body to its rightful owner, no hesitation, and he guaranteed he'd keep his word. Mueon watched him with real curiosity, finding his whole attitude pretty strange. Shinil agreed that Adokabi's promise could be trusted, deciding to accept the peace deal on the spot. The captain asked if the only outsiders present were Sunbuck and Kim, who just nodded in silence. Myoyan decided to clear up the misunderstandings before everyone parted ways, leaving the glasses kid pretty confused. She flashed a gentle smile and said she'd recommend joining the company, but guaranteed she'd never force anyone into it. Kim looked surprised and the captain took both their hands in a friendly gesture, confirming they were completely free to choose. Myoyan said forcing people would basically make them a cult, and guaranteed they were genuinely good people, though she warned, smiling, that now that they were involved, karma was already in motion and they'd definitely cross paths again. The kid tried to ask what she meant by that, but Sunbuck was already getting ready to bounce. Suddenly a blinding light started wrapping around their bodies, leaving everyone scared by whatever was happening. Myoyan said goodbye, promising they'd only come back after living through some genuinely great adventures out in the world. Kim's soul got yanked through a portal as he heard the captain promise they'd bring back some incredible stories. Sunbuck dropped through the same spiritual whirlwind right after, gripping her weapon in silence. The whole way down, Myoyan shouted that she'd be waiting anxiously for their return, while Kim begged, desperate for her to just wait. The kid kept shouting into the void until he slammed down hard, right in front of the tiny kimbap restaurant. He looked around, stunned, noticing the snack shop and the whole street were completely back to normal, like nothing had ever happened. Kim noticed the elderly lady was fine, while Sunbuck watched the scene in silence. Thinking hard about the captain's insane power, she advised the kid to join the organization, which confused him, since she'd been dead set against that idea earlier. Sunbuck privately thought to herself that even though she'd gotten caught off guard, that girl's strength was on a whole other level of monstrous. She remembered how the other captain had taken a direct hit from the Goblin King and just kept chatting normally like nothing happened. The fact that he'd calmly kept talking after an overwhelming blow like that left Sunbuck genuinely stunned. Sunbuck concluded that the monk's body must have also blown past every normal human limit, and remembered Shinil calling them captain. She deduced there were at least 3 warriors at that absurd power level, running around inside the organization, and on top of that she remembered there was still some mysterious boss commanding every captain from the very top of the hierarchy. Sunbuck said it'd honestly be smart to have a group that strong as an ally, and asked what the kid planned to do now. She stated only the weak actually needed help, and said her goodbyes, saying she was off to go enjoy her new human body. Sunbuck told the kid to just go to school already, saying there must be people waiting on him, leaving the boy pretty confused. The kid started thinking about school under the open blue sky, wondering who could actually be waiting for him to come back. A red-haired, seriously buffed-out kid showed up in the classroom, complaining that the kid had been missing for 2 whole days, grinding his teeth in pure fury remembering he'd bought a fake talisman and gotten scammed by the guy. Kim scratched his head, worried, remembering the only people waiting for him at school just wanted him gone for good.